have the great pleasure to be in the beautiful home of the world-renowned artist, Philip Tsiaras. Philip has a great range of mediums in art, ranging from, let's begin with poetry, photography, painting, glass,
ceramic,
interior design, ceramics, multi-talented Greek American that we're all very proud of. Philip, you have such a great history behind you. I don't know if this show is enough to talk about your accomplishments and your talent, but I would like to begin with your background, because your love and passion comes from your Greek roots, I believe.
It does.
Or so you've said.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, my parents are Greek immigrants, so I was born in the United States, so I'm a Greek American. But I have a strong relationship with the country. I keep an apartment in Athens. I go back and forth frequently, and primarily for work, because I'm showing a lot in Greece.
Well, we have to say that you're from New Hampshire.
I was born in New Hampshire, yes.
One of the largest Greek populations, Greek descent populations in the United States.
My grandfather came with some friends of his from the village in Greece to work on the railroads.
Northern Greece.
From northern Greece, and my grandfather's from Grevena, from the northern part of Greece. And he married a Greek woman in Manchester, New Hampshire, who was from the village next door.
Wow.
I think Pendalofo was the name of the village.
And what year
Oddly
are we
enough,
talking about?
1922, 1920, something like that.
Right.
So my father was born in the United States, as was two other children. And on the fourth child, my grandmother died with the child. And my father was away on the railroads, and my grandfather was away on the... So he felt like he couldn't take care of his family being away, so he gathered his children and went back to Greece, which is why my father had an American passport. And then many things happened. There was the Greek Civil War. My father became a captain in the Andartis with Aris Velouchioti, and of course bad things happened, and the Andartis were considered to be all communists left, not under Roosevelt, but under Truman. So my father was lucky enough to be able to leave Greece, because I have other relatives that went to Bulgaria and Russia and whatever, because they were not allowed.
Right.
They would either go to jail or leave.
Or leave.
Yeah. So my father arrived in the United States, oddly enough, which was great, because it was they came here in 1947. My oldest brother, who was born in Greece, is now head of the ophthalmology department at Brown.
Very
all
successful.
Of my brothers,
Your older brother, Alexander.
all of my brothers are, we hit the American dream at the right time. Also,
Right,
now maybe it would be different, but.
And you're living the American dream. You studied poetry at Amherst.
I did.
English
I studied
literature.
English literature at Amherst College. I was lucky to go to a privileged sort of Ivy League college.
And you had the great fortune of becoming friends and studying with former prime ministers of Greece.
The two recent former prime ministers. I don't know who had the great fortune. Perhaps they had the great fortune to be with me. But anyway, in freshman year, Antonis Samaras was upstairs from me, and George Papadreou was directly across the hall from me in another room. So obviously
buddies.
the Greeks, got together there, and
did they want to be prime ministers back then?
I think Antonis Samaras always wanted to be. He definitely wanted to be. I'm sure in his dreams, he wanted to be prime minister. But George was the apparent heir to the throne, because his father was the prime minister, his grandfather was prime minister, and his father was around, collecting money. They were in exile, so they were collecting money for PAC, I think was the organization then, before it became PASOK. So, and of course, it was the junta. I mean, it was a great time to be in the university. This is when they were talking now, 1970 to 75, around there.
There was political uproar all around the world.
There was a Vietnam War was raging. Everybody was afraid to be drafted. Everyone was against the war, primarily students.
Yes.
And there was a junta in Greece. So even though they were from different political backgrounds, the fact that they were there in the United States, which is really the melting pot of all places, and because Amherst was a highly intellectual place, it was a hard school to be in.
Yes.
So
it breeds politicians.
Yeah, and it was also had an international background. We had the King Albert, went there. It was then Prince Albert, and lots of dignitaries. So it wasn't as though they were the only famous people around. And in the United States, especially in an institution like that, they diminish, a little bit who you are, where you came from. That's the American dream, is that in the university we're all one kind of person, and you excel intellectually, not from your family
Not from
history.
a position, right.
So
social
yeah,
position.
so other people didn't defer to anyone in any way. And then of course Tsiaras was studying economics. He went on to Harvard Business School, and you know, the dream of becoming prime minister would have been much later. Now we're talking, I was 17, he was 18,
Right.
whatever. We were kids. We were more interested in getting good grades and getting good girls. So
Well, you studied English literature. You were the artist of the pack.
I was the more creative person. I helped them with their papers because I was good at writing, you know, and they were not.
But you're
it was
not
a
only
good time.
talented as a poet, because this is how you entered the artist world as a poet. You took your poetry on into photography and into painting. Tell us a little bit more. What you were always, I mean, you were born with the gift.
I always wanted to do something.
You didn't work hard at it, it was natural.
Well, you have to work hard at the gift, believe me, otherwise it's just sitting in a box. The thing was this, you know, I went to a high-level place, and my parents had expectations of me, probably to go to law school, or maybe to go to Harvard Law School, I don't know.
All Greeks have that. That's the
Yeah,
wish for their
and, you know, they
children.
all want them to be all doctors or all lawyers or whatever, which is fine, you know, because it gives you a bar, you know, set some kind of a bar. So initially I was doing some pre-law things, but I knew my heart wasn't in it. I was more interested in writing, and so I started to, I focused in literature because I thought, okay, I could always teach in a university and write and whatever. But I just, when I graduated from college, I went to Greece on a fellowship called the Thomas Watson Fellowship, which was for 1 year of intellectual studies. It's an interesting grant. It's like a Fulbright grant, but a little better. And it was the first time that I actually ever lived in Greece. It was 1977. And Greece was an incredibly different place then. It was 35 cents. The dollar was 35 drachmas was a dollar.
It was, yes.
If you had a 500 euro bill,
350
you could
drachmas
live
was
the
a
whole
dollar.
week with 500
Right,
drachmas.
right.
1,000 drachmas was a lot of money.
It was a lot of money, right?
Anyway, so it was an interesting place. It was then very, all the university students were Kappa Kappa. They were all essentially communist in leaning. Now all of the students, you know, want to have country houses and a BMW and Apple, whatever. And it's changed. Greece has changed a lot on a political, even though the government hasn't. But
let's stick to the creative side.
Okay.
How was Greece creatively back then and today? How do you find? Is there new artists coming out?
Well, Greece was 1977. Greece was very, very behind the times, you know, which was also very beautiful because it was unspoiled. You know, when it joined the European Union, it became much more Italianophiled. It became much less Greek. It became much less ethnic. It became much less of a lot of those beautiful things that we loved about Greece. But that's what progress is. I mean, nothing ever remains the same. I enjoyed my time there a lot. I enjoy all of my time in Greece.
You were an apprentice of Luca Tsiaras?
I had graduated from university. I had just started to work for Tsiaras. I went to Greece for a year, then I came back and I worked for him. I learned a lot, of course, because I didn't study the visual arts. I learned a lot by working with an artist because that's really the only way you learn. You learn by seeing how somebody else does it, can do it,
yes.
Meeting people through that person, seeing how an artist actually works and makes a living from it, because it is, no matter how you look at it, it is also a job. You know, you have to make something, and that little thing has to go to market. That will allow you to continue to work again. It is something that you have to develop. It's not just painting when the muse
Of course. And
hits
one
you.
thing we must say about Philip, you're not only an artist, there's a big entrepreneurial side of you. You happen to be also a businessman, which is very rare to see with an artist, and that's
Well,
wonderful.
I don't know if I would call myself a businessman, but I have a sense of business.
You have a very
In other
good
words,
sense of business.
I think all Greeks, to tell you the truth, all Greeks have that in them. I mean, it's in our DNA. We are for centuries merchants. You know, there was no land to till, so the Greeks went on boats and traded. It's in our blood, I think, which is why even Armenians are afraid of Greeks, you know? Even the Jews are afraid of Greeks when it comes to business. So we are, I think, traders by nature, and you know, having a sense of business. When I say business, I mean
having a business sense, do you believe that that helped you in your career? Because you have a permanent collection in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. You have worked with very big designers, Cavalli. You've worked with so many different people. Your art is everywhere. It's even in Sotheby's, on the walls of one of the most expensive properties in Manhattan right now, in Sotheby's.
It is. Yeah.
Tell me, how did Philip become so successful?
It doesn't. It's a one-step climbed at a time. So if there are any artists out there that are listening to me, do not think that this happens overnight. Believe me, I lived on vapors in New York City for 10 years. When all of my classmates were going on and becoming lawyers and doctors and whatever, I chose to do something which was very difficult, and I had to live from my work, and it's not easy in the beginning. So
transitioning from poetry into painting. How did that happen? You could have taken the route of writing, but you ended up going into painting.
Because at the time I was writing poetry, I won the American Academy Award for Poetry. It was a big thing, and I thought, okay, fine, I will focus on that. When concurrently, I was doing a lot of photography, and quite professionally. I even had a museum show when I was in college at the Seattle Museum of Contemporary Art. So I knew that I was interested in my photography. I went to Greece, and Greece was the deal breaker. I lived for about 4 or 5 months with the world of poetry, and I saw all the Greek poets had to pay to publish their own book of poetry. They were all backstabbing each other. It was a tiny, tiny little pie. While I was in Greece, I met also Jean Bernier, who's still now the biggest gallery in Greece, and I made an exhibition there. Somebody traded me a BMW for pictures, which was a big thing in 1977, you know, or Yannis with a BMW. So that's how they used to refer to people by their cars, or Yorgos with a Mercedes. So, I met much wealthier Greeks. There were lots of parties given for me. I sold works. It was a much more glamorous world, and I thought, okay, well, I have the choice. So I returned to the United States. I went to Columbia, graduate school in creative writing for 20 days. And realized if I really want to be a poet, there's no reason to spend all this money to go to graduate school. I'll write poetry. I had already begun my career as a visual artist. You know, I did very well in Greece. I became sort of a young star.
What were some of your first works? Did they have Greek influence, or were they just abstract?
When I was doing photography in Athens in 1977, I started to paint on the photographs. So I would do a black and white, and then they would do the same picture, all hand painted, like. Instead of making a color image, I hand painted it. From there, you know, when I came back to New York, I decided, okay, fine, I don't need the photograph anymore. I'll go write the drawing. And I basically went directly into that. I had a show on 57th Street that was quite fortunate. Then, and you know, one show leads to another, leads to a museum, leads to this. And then in 1981, the Metropolitan bought works of mine from a very big show where Basquiat was and Keith Haring. They selected me instead, and sold a lot of works. And you know, then I had a book published in Italy. Then I started to work in Italy quite a lot, and there I started to make glass. You know, I started to make bronzes. You know, I expanded out of two-dimensional art into three-dimensional art. And you know, it's a long process. It's a long story. You know, 30 years. There's a lot can get jammed into that.
Ending with success, of course. Not ending, continuing.
This is just the beginning.
Just the beginning. And furniture, because you are also designing wonderful pieces of furniture. They're works of art, but then again, everything is a work of art.
Well, this is the way I look at it. You know, the artist, if you think of the old Renaissance artists, they used to do everything. Michelangelo designed canals in Milan. If you read the letters of Da Vinci, he says to the patron, I can make bridges, you know, that can deconstruct, destroy the enemy. You know, I can paint Madonnas, I can do this, I can do that. If you read them, they're very brazen, you can't believe it. It's like a salesman.
Right.
I believe that a creative person is creative, period, right down to their bones. I went to college as a music major, and for many years I was a classically trained musician. And
which organ did you play?
I played the clarinet and saxophone. And then I went to college as a music major with a scholarship. I wrote music, and I segued from that into poetry. It's all music and it's all art. In other words, if you have the gift, and I don't say the gift just falls on you, but if you have the creativity gift, you can amplify that outwards toward other media. Most people are afraid. They go to art school, they get ruined in art school because the art school tells them, you have to make the sculpture like this, and you cannot do this. Photographs have to be done like this, this has to be done like that. And they are given boundaries and barriers. Well, because I'm self-taught and because my background is literature, I have no boundaries. So whenever I get into something, I jump in completely. And I take my literary background with me. In other words, I'd rather put Sophocles, in ceramics, rather than some art teacher, who couldn't make it himself.
Does that inspire you? Do words inspire you into your art and your drawings and your
Well,
paintings?
words and also ideas, because behind everything there has to be a bigger idea. So when you start a body of work, it cannot just be some experiential thing that you do that feels great. It has to also have meaning, and the meaning has to be also amplified into another dimension, so that it not only interests me, but it will interest bigger minds outside of my own sphere.
Tell us a little bit about your collections, your favorite collections.
In terms of what I personally collect?
Yes.
Well, I collect contemporary art as a collector. I have a lot of modern masters like Picasso, etchings, Warhol, Lucas Samaras, who I think is one of the great artists. Not just because I work for him, but because he is. I have Rauschenberg, a lot of the major names. I have primarily a big collection of Warhol.
And antiques you also collect.
And I also collect antiques, mostly European 18th and 19th century antiques. This table here is the centerpieces from the 1750s. It was from a funereal, I bought it from a dealer in Florence. And then I fabricated the table to look like an eye, so it would go with my eye paintings.
Tell us about each era or phase of your artwork. Tell us some of the your personal collections.
Well, I mean, right now I'm focusing on one particular body of work. In terms of a collector, I'm buying the Italian avant-garde from the 1950s. That's Fontana, Dada Maino. I don't know if this will interest people, but there was a show at the Guggenheim recently. They're called the Gruppo Zero. And in 1959, they did the first cuts of paintings. They did all these very avant-garde works, and they were not recognized because the American abstract expressionists were getting all the attention. So now they are being revalued upwards.
Tell us a little bit about your paintings.
Okay.
You have some influences from horses, from nature, then again, some guns I've seen. Tell us about that.
All right. Well, painting is another evolutionary thing, but I would say that I'm perhaps known better, for horse paintings, because the horse is a very important subject in my work, and I've been making a variety of horse paintings since 1980. When I say the horse, what happens in my work is I usually focus on a subject, and that subject I carry through over the years. As my work changes, the subject continues to remain, but it evolves with the paintings. So if you see a horse painting of mine from 20 years ago, it doesn't resemble anything from now, because my work is changing. But the subject I keep as a kind of anchor, and I believe in that. I believe that all art requires some kind of an anchor that brings you back to yourself. The horse for me became this magical mantra, that I could do in my sleep, and because of that, I was able to reinterpret it. As it's like an artist is reinventing himself all the time. Well, even the subject that you paint, you can reinvent stylistically through your work. So I would then go and make glass, and some of my subjects, the gun, the horse, okay, the human head, the high heel shoe, a lot of these things reoccur in my work. They're not like Ephialtes or something.
The circles.
Well, now these new circular paintings. Even the circular paintings, they started in 1995. I was invited by the mayor of Venice to interpret the ancient waters, a very interesting project. And I tried to figure out a way to fossilize the look of water so that it looked ancient, like an ancient urn pulled out of the sea, craquelé, kind of thing. And I was doing these long seascape things that looked like the explosions at sea. At a certain point, I was thinking water, is what the ancient water, now targia nera, right? If you look at the earth from the perspective of the moon, it's all made of water. So then I started to make round paintings that reflected all the colors of the... And then, this is how an artist takes a subject and gives it more life. Then I said, okay, fine, there's the earth, ancient water. How was the earth created? The Big Bang. sunlight and moisture, photosynthesis. So then you have bacteria, you have color, you have the earth. Water going through the earth creates silver, gold, carbon, plate tectonics, create all these phenomena. So I started to make these round paintings that were also monochromatic, even though they had to do with ancient waters. So the whole thing started in 1995 with Archea Nera. I showed them in Kerkira, at the Neofrurio. I showed them at the Ermoupolis in Syros. All of these places that also had Venetian occupations. I thought that was an interesting thing. But as the subject evolves, as you also evolve, and instead of continuing to do the same kind of waterworks, I started to make monochromatic paintings, which also, if you think of Antarctica, you know, or the Arctic, it's all white on white. So you have white on white paintings, or black on black, carbon, or red, the cadmium red, which is produced by water and pressure going through the earth. So this is the kind of things I think about when I'm having my morning coffee.
Well, that's fabulous. Philip, I mean, you know, you've evolved so much as an artist. You've created so many wonderful pieces of work, which I would love the viewer to look into your work and follow you. And they can follow you, of course, on your website as well.
They can follow me on my website. I think they can probably follow me on a lot of things, on Instagram and all these other various things. But
what is it that you would advise, you know, artists to do, getting into a career, you know, deciding to pursue a career of art? How easy, how difficult is it?
Well, first of all, it's next to impossible, because there's far too many people that want to be artists. The New York metropolitan area has 200,000 plus artists here. It's like an army, okay? And all of those people want to be known artists. They're all working in their studios. They all want what you have. So unless you are 100% sure that that's what you want to do, and you're willing to take the risk, you know, that means the career risk, because most people don't want to do that. They want to make sure that they have something on the side. They want to make sure that they can do this. And it doesn't really work that way. You really have to give it, you really have to dedicate yourself to making it happen, because otherwise it will not happen. But you can live a fruitful life from your works, which is the greatest thing imaginable, because for me, this is what I love to do. I would do it even if I wasn't making money. But I mean, this is what I love to do, so what could be better than that? Now, when I see I just went to my reunion at Amherst College, and I see all of these attorneys, you know, that I envied at one point when I was a struggling artist, and all these doctors and whatever else, you know, these investment bankers. They are all still kind of in the same grind that they were in when they first started. They don't have the luxury to travel to places where I do, because they don't have that kind of time, you know. They're still in the same rut.
Do you feel like you're working?
When I'm working? No, I love what I do. I love what I do.
And I guess that's the bottom line. We should all be so blessed to have a job that we don't feel like we're working.
I love what I do, and also when I talk to them, I realize that they are really essentially where they were, because as lawyers, they still have to bring people to the firm. They're in the same thing. So until they retire, it's a rat race from beginning to end, which they, in a way, almost even resent to some degree. I mean, I'm happy every day that I'm able to do what I can do, and I also have the luxury to be able to go and make an exhibition in Greece on an island in a museum, or now I'm trying to do something in Qatar or in Bahrain, or I'm going to do something in a museum in China, because I've orchestrated my life in such a way that I can do that now. And
you've been very fortunate.
It's fun.
You're very talented, and you're sharing your talents with the world, and that's wonderful. We're very proud that you're Greek. Let's leave our viewers with a message of what do you believe your roots, your Hellenist DNA, your Hellenism brings to your work?
Well, I think my work is very Greek in spirit, because we didn't really talk about my photography, but my photography, I think, has been very influenced by the whole immigrant background. And
you have a great book, by the way, A Philip Tsiaras Family.
I mean, I did this for 10 years. I photographed my own family in a sensitive parody of Greek immigrants in the United States. I'm in my underwear, they're all dressed normally. And I did that for 10 years, which is as crazy as you can get. But it was a very successful project, and it brought me a lot of attention.
And your parents are very supportive.
well, Greek parents, when they are supportive,
When they are
the
supportive,
best.
yeah.
When they are not supportive, they are the worst. But it so happened that my parents, were from villages in Greece, and their love of family was bigger than their social conscience, and therefore they were able to believe in me, and I got them to do things that I would never be able to get a second or third generation family to do, because they're too concerned with what other people think. But in that way, they were very creative, and avant-garde in their own.
And those times were very conservative.
And those times were even more conservative.
Right.
So they were wonderful to do that. But I also, put a little pressure on them, because,
That's
I
it.
told them that.
But you're a Northern Greek. That's it.
I
This
told
is
them
what
that
we're
they had
doing.
to help me, or else I'd be a failure. So they knew what that meant. I gave them tipsies.
So you carry all of this. All of this is within Philip Tsiaras and Tsiaras' work. Congratulations on everything, Philip.
Thank you.
We're waiting to see your next reinvention
Oh,
of
my next
yourself and
reinvention.
your collection.
My next reinvention, I'm reinventing the Parthenon. That's my next reinvention.
Very interesting.
I photographed the Parthenon extensively over the 70s and 80s, and now I've done a series of images where in each one the Parthenon is completely changed, with all hand painted. And I would like to I'm doing a book of them that will come out sometime in the fall, and I would like to do a major show of them somewhere in Greece, maybe even at the Acropolis Museum. I know that the previous Prime Minister wanted me to do them there. He liked them. So we'll see what happens. But I'm very.
I think all prime ministers like your work. It's just wonderful.
I don't know about the new one, but we'll have to ask him. But I'm very optimistic for Greece, even though they are in perilous times. I'm very optimistic for them, and I believe that they will come out of this, because they're an ingenious people, and they have a lot of heart and soul. So if they get through this little hump that they're in now,
oh, they will. We will.
The country will come back again.
The country
will
will come back
again.
Well, thank you very much, Philip.
Okay.
It was a pleasure being here and seeing your
Nice to see
wonderful
you.
work.
Okay.